The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Monday, February 24th, 2025, and this is your Monday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are going to get to all the nerdy news you need to get your week started. And we've got some good news this week, which is what we will be starting the week off with. And we've got a very strange segment from Smackdown to talk about and see if we can make some sense of. And a couple other news items, and of course we will wrap things up with the Empire Express that will cover a bunch of stories in a short amount of time. Joining me in studio on this Monday morning is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
I feel like I was just here 2 or 3 hours ago. I know that's not entirely accurate, but that's kind of how it feels this morning, it being typical kind of difficult Monday morning to want to get back up and get going again, but thankfully we got some really cool stories today, so we can get the week started right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best thing is that we have some good news to start the week off with, and that is what we are going to lead off with right out of the gate. And it is the news that happened over, I guess, the end of last week. It was on Friday when this article posted on the Facebook page of Sekaicon. And that is what we're showing here, that obviously everybody knows, especially if you've been listening to this podcast or are in any way connected to the anime community in Ohio, what has been going on with Ohayocon suing Sekaicon, Sekai Guild. And basically what led to this was what ended up being a ruling in the Hamilton County courts that came out kind of middle of last week, was finally filed on Wednesday, I believe, that basically said that the defendants, in this case Sekai Guild, have the right to go forward with an event so long as they don't use trade secrets, all that other stuff from the plaintiffs. Basically, it gave them the green light to continue forward with planning an anime convention. So on Friday, they posted this update on their Facebook page that basically said, hey, we're sorry for the radio silence. I think most people understand, but we are going to be able to go forward and have this convention, which will be coming up in April. And I think most people were super excited about that. I think, outside of the handful of hardcore people that are tied to Ohayocon or in that inner circle, if you're a neutral or if you're kind of anti-Ohayocon, I guess there are certainly those people out there, you're very excited to see Sekaicon come through the other side of this. Now, obviously, there's still the pending litigation and all that to deal with, and we'll certainly continue to cover that. But just the fact that they're going to be able to have this convention feels like at least a small win for this convention that, really, up until last week, we weren't 100% sure this con was even going to be able to happen.
Yeah, this was kind of the next step we were waiting for, kind of that, how does the restraining order kind of morph into something that's tenable for both sides while this thing unrolls? But yeah, it makes a lot of sense for both parties. I mean, if I'm suing you and I'm hoping to get some sort of monetary compensation, the last thing I'd want is for you to not be able to put on an event that could potentially earn you money. I think, from Ohayocon's point of view, they would certainly want Sekaicon to move forward. But yeah, a lot of positivity around this message, talking about them returning to normal operations. Obviously, they can't provide further details, which, again, I think people understand that. They thank their supporters for reaching out and showing support during this because, you look at the convention side of it, yeah, we're glad it's back up and running, but I think from the personal side, you kind of get used to seeing these people post on the Discord and post things on the Facebook, and then for them to go silent, which we know why, but it's still kind of jarring to think, hey, are these guys okay? Like, I can't imagine what it's like to be served with something like this. That, even if you expected it, it's still shocking to have to deal with, and it's just good to hear that they're fighting it, they're back up and running, and seemingly in good spirits, all things considered.
Yeah, and I think, kind of on top of that, they immediately get out on the road.
Yeah.
As we see this post the next day, that representatives of the convention were out at Anime Crossroads over the weekend with a booth set up. So immediately they're right back to the community outreach, which to me has been the biggest positive that has come from this spin-off convention is the anime days they've had up in Dayton, the different other events that they've planned, the fact that they do get out to these conventions and try to spread the word. Like, that was one of those things. I mean, they've lost a lot of time because there were probably a lot of conventions at the end of the year and the beginning of this year that they would have probably been to that they just had to back off and say, hey, we've got to wait because we're not going to promote an event that's not going to happen. And now they're kind of full steam ahead. And they've already, if you're someone who's looking to panel there or whatever it may be, they have already posted some of the extended deadlines. I think they said there were more coming this week.
Yeah,
that
the dance competition has had an extension on the application deadline. That's what I saw at the very least, but I'm sure everything's going to have to at this point.
Yeah, because obviously there was a stretch where they couldn't even really deal with any of that. And the Discord obviously still locked down. That presumably will go back to Ohayocon. I'm sure that's probably still in negotiation at this point. I think, on the one hand, they would probably like to keep the Discord just because all their people were there, and you've got your people that are really interested in the convention that are already there. But at the same time, if they need to start a new Discord, they would probably like to know that right away too, so they can go ahead and get to the business of, hey, here's our new Discord. Go join it. The other Discord's going to disappear, become Ohayocon, whatever it may be.
I don't know what the typical conversion rate is for when you start a new Discord, how many people actually migrate over with you, but I kind of get the feeling that if they did abandon the current Discord for a new Sekaicon Discord server, I think they'd get a lot of people immediately jumping over. And at the very least, if the other one goes back to Ohayocon, you would see a fairly substantial exodus from it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd consider just leaving it just because I have a feeling that's what's going to happen. But I also, there's a part of me as we do this podcast that I maybe want to hang around just to see what ends up showing up in there until I get booted out of there and just have
absolutely.
that intel on the inside. But, it's great to see. Certainly rooting for these guys and was already rooting for these guys. But I think now even more so with everything that's happened. And again, I feel like we've done a really good job on this podcast of staying very impartial and trying to report facts as they are and not what we want them to be. So, and we'll continue to do that. I mean, even though we are certainly rooting for this convention to succeed, as the facts come out, as the case moves forward, we're going to continue to report on it. And, I would love to at some point, once all the dust settles, have some of the Sekaicon people on our podcast or go up and do a podcast with them to just kind of get their side of the story once everything is as much as they can. Because I have a feeling, I still feel like this ends in a settlement because I don't think Ohayocon really has a case. And I think running it all the way through could run the risk of them owing more money because they could lose and then owe attorney's fees on top of that. I think part of a settlement probably includes NDAs, which is typically what you get in this situation. So we may never get the full story unless it actually goes all the way out, because that's the other thing too, is a lot of that's going to be public too if it ends up in court, because all that stuff's going to be admitted as evidence. And I don't know that Ohayocon wants that.
The funny thing about that is if there were to be a settlement, I kind of feel like both sides would be more than happy to sign NDAs and never talk about any of this again.
Yeah.
I think we've already seen it from the Sakai group where they pretty much from day one in the Discord server said, hey, we're not talking about this anymore. And they basically told people, don't mention the other convention. We're doing our own thing. And I don't know if any good would come out of Ohayocon talking about things that would potentially be covered under an NDA in the future.
The Sekaicon side of it, totally 100% agree. I think they would move on tomorrow and you never mention the word Ohayocon again. I just wonder if it's just not part of Ohayocon's MO at this point, that I don't know if they can exist without mentioning these other guys. Like, it would do them good to never mention Sekaicon again and move on. And if they're ever going to put on another convention, just kind of start over. I just don't know if they can. I don't know. I think once you've shown you're this petty, I get the feeling that that they'll have a hard time doing that. But I think that could be their downfall because, again, I don't think going to trial benefits anybody but the attorneys at this point.
For sure. I don't. I do wonder if the trial doesn't quite go the way they hope it goes. I don't know if you wouldn't see kind of a shift in mindset there where it's like, well, we didn't get what we wanted. We should probably just drop it and try to salvage what we have left, if anything. I think kind of going back to what you mentioned earlier about Sekaicon being out at Anime Crossroads, I think that's always been the big difference between how you feel about the two groups is that the Sekai Guild people, they give you the impression that they're genuinely interested in building a community, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't felt that way about Ohayocon in a while, so I think that's always going to be a distinction that they can't really do anything about.
I think Ohayocon was more interested in destroying their community based on social media posts that led up to their convention.
So it seems.
So yeah, big difference there. But congrats to the Sekaicon people. Excited. We'll continue to report on their build up, and hopefully be able to go up at least for a day or two just to kind of support what they're doing. And
I think it's also worth noting now too, because originally when we were talking about these, we kind of viewed it from a which convention is going to be the better of the two. But I think now in light of everything that's happened, we got to keep in mind that Sekaicon, and we've known this, but Sekaicon's a brand new thing. I think the excitement shouldn't be around how many guests can they bring or how many featured panelists do they have. I think the excitement for people needs to be you can get in on the ground floor of a brand new convention and building a brand new community kind of out of the ashes of the old one. I think that should be what excites people moving into Sekaicon, not so much, well, they didn't book this person or they didn't book this person.
Well, let's be fair. The bar is pretty much on the floor when it comes to trying to be better than Ohayocon this year. Like, that's not much of a challenge. But the other thing to keep in mind, too, for folks is they lost a couple months. Like, on top of the fact it was always going to be a challenge to create this convention from scratch, they lost a couple months of the build-up that, now means that there could be some things that, hey, we wanted to do this, but we really don't have time now because it's February and we're almost a month away because it's the beginning. It's like April 11th to the 13th. So, I mean, they were closing in on a month to go till this thing. So there could be some things that get scaled back or some plans like, hey, we're going to have to do this in year 2 because we just don't have the time to get it where we need to get it. So I hope people are understanding. I think because most of the diehards that are kind of around Sakai kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I have a feeling they're going to be happy that anything is happening, and hopefully you can support it in year 1 so that it can continue to grow and flourish as it goes forward. And I would love to see them at some point take that January time slot.
It's a great time for a convention.
It is. I mean, April's fine. It's better from a weather standpoint, but as far as like my schedule, at least selfishly, is not necessarily always great that, once we get into the spring sports season. But
well, we've talked about it before. That was one of Ohiocon's biggest selling points, was that it was kind of right there at the beginning of the year when you kind of wanted a break from the winter and something positive to get your year started right post holidays. I think it broke up the winter into 2 nice little sections, and even when maybe it wasn't the most impressive convention, it was still an event that split your winter up, and I think that was always a really cool thing.
It probably had us hanging on to that convention longer than we needed to because of that very reason.
Sure.
I'm guessing we're not alone in that, but really good news. Again, we'll keep you updated on what's going on with Sekaicon. We'll keep you updated on what's going on with the lawsuit. Will certainly be more news on both fronts over the next few weeks, but really excited for these guys that they're going to be able to have their convention, and hopefully it goes really well for them. Let's get to a few other news items today. Nothing really huge on the docket, but just some interesting things. The announcement over the weekend or late last week that a Korea-based VR development studio announced an extended reality game based on the Neon Genesis Evangelion franchise scheduled for release in 2026. They're planning a trilogy of games based on all 26 episodes of the original TV anime. Obviously, Evangelion's a staple. You've had so many different. You had the movies that came out that took a long time to come out, and I still haven't seen the last couple of those because they took so long. You had some other movies from kind of when the TV series came out. The TV series is kind of the staple of the franchise. ADV released it approximately 38 times while they had the rights to it. I have the Platinum Edition, which is really excellent. But I'm curious what extended reality is, because it doesn't really say in this article exactly what it is. The fact that it's tied to a VR studio, I have to assume it is in some way related to VR content, but I'm not exactly sure what that is.
Yeah, and I certainly hope that's the case, and it's not just going to be a mobile game with augmented reality features that they're branding as extended reality.
Right.
I've not heard that term really before. I've heard augmented, I've heard virtual. I'm not really sure what the difference is and what makes extended reality special or a thing. They do mention that you will explore the world as an original character, which is kind of weird within the Ava TV series framework. Like, what is your original character? Not that I want to be Shinji, but it's weird how that'll fit into what's already been an established story. There are quests and battles based on the anime's timeline. It sounds neat, obviously, but again, I think like, of all the anime worlds that you could have this really immersive virtual experience in, is the world of Ava the one you want?
It's kind of dark and depressing. I feel like being a original character in that is like being an original character in the original Star Trek. Like, you're the red shirt guy. Like,
Yeah,
they're gonna
like, you're
send
not
you
coming
down.
back.
You're not coming back. You're not gonna make it through these missions. Yeah, I think there are other anime that I feel like would be a better fit. Now, I will say, obviously, Evangelion's IP is still incredibly popular.
Oh, sure.
You see, I mean, I remember they sell razors and stuff, like, with all this,
Not to mention, how many times have you seen someone build a PC that has like the ridiculous? I can't remember if it was Asus or who was it that had like the Ava branded computer components.
Yeah.
Just totally ridiculous.
So I could see where it's like, okay, we're going to try this new thing. Let's try it on a really big property that, probably we can work with them and get a bunch of money to do this. But I mean, there are a lot of anime worlds that would make for an interesting future game if this does well. But again, I think everybody kind of wants to know exactly what it's going to be before you get too excited over what it is.
I think it brings about what could be an interesting topic, and that would be like a top 5 and bottom 5 worlds that you would want either a VR game centered in or to be isekai'd to.
Yeah.
I just kind of feel like, just off the top of my head, Ava would be one of the lower ones that I would want. Probably right up there with Attack on Titan would be another world I'd want no interest in being a part of.
For sure.
But yeah,
Made in Abyss, probably.
Yeah, I hear that's pretty bleak.
Yeah.
Dr. Stone. I don't like the idea of being petrified for years and years.
Sure.
But, I'm sure visually it could be really striking and really cool just based on what Ava is. I don't know if I want to spend a long time there.
Yeah. I mean, the Gundam world is also another one that, there's some really cool stuff in Gundam, but you also might end up in space and a fighting robot, which might not be the best way to go. So
yeah, and then the question's like, if you're in the Gundam world, do you want to be a new type or whatever that series equivalent is, or do you want to just be a normal citizen? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's so many of those worlds get destroyed in Gundam. That might not be a good thing either. So
might end up with a colony getting dropped on your planet. Like, you don't want that.
For sure. But yeah, just interesting. We don't really know what exactly this is, but it is certainly something that Ava fans are at least interested in seeing what it might be. And it's not coming out till 2026, so I would not expect any major details till we get a little later in 2025. But could be cool. Well, we'll see kind of how that goes. Another thing that we always like on these podcasts are lists. So let's talk more about lists. It was weird how this was headlined on CBR. The fact that they emphasized that Demon Slayer missed #1 instead of highlighting the show that got #1. But this is the ABEMA rankings for anime for 2024. ABEMA is kind of the Japanese Netflix. And Oshinoko Season 2 came out #1. Here's the original article in Japanese that basically talks a little bit about it. And for some reason, my window didn't translate it, which is kind of weird. We'll do that right there. So there's your top 5 for the year. Oshinoko season 2 came out number 1. Crayon Shinchan number 2. That's amazing to me. That
Yeah.
series has been around forever. And here it is, still number 2, beating out Demon Slayer, and then the Apothecary Diaries, and it's something that clearly translated there at number 5.
Osan Newbie Adventurer.
Okay, there we go. Newbie old adventurer is trained to death by the strongest party and becomes invincible.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the translated title. I remember that one coming out, but oddly enough, I didn't watch it.
Evidently super popular in Japan.
Yeah, I mean, of all those similar shows that I did decide to watch, and I didn't pick that one, I had no idea that was going to be super popular. I kind of feel bad now.
But, yeah, I mean, I guess of this top 5, Oshinoko doesn't surprise me. That arc of the series is probably one of the most popular arcs in the manga. It was really well adapted. The Shinchan movie, I'm still amazed that show in general is still so popular, and yet, and this movie being one of the top series of or shows of the year, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, I obviously that show's been running for a crazy long time, and I do remember that kind of first run of dubbed episodes of Shin-Chan that came over here. Those were absolutely hilarious. I don't know if the original has that level of humor, but clearly it's remained popular after all this time, that there's an actual choice between people wanting to watch Demon Slayer and Shin-Chan, and they're actually preferring Shin-Chan. So that's kind of a wild thing.
Yeah. Another thing that came out of this was a little bit of demographic data, which is always fascinating. I think the interesting thing is that female viewers increased by about 9%. Looks like still 37%, so it's still the minority compared to men. Also, a pretty decent balance between the age groups. Viewers in their 30s grew for both men and women. The number of viewers on TV devices also grew by 110% as more people are streaming their mobile or social apps on television. I mean, we see that all the time with YouTube and things like that over here, so not surprising to see that start to become popular in Japan. But you see like 13% in the 10s, 25% in their 20s, 25% in their 30s, 22% in their 40s, and 15% 50 or older. So a pretty solid balance across the board, which is, I would love to see more of the demographic side. Unfortunately, they're kind of limited in this article, but that stuff always really fascinates me.
Yeah, and it's certainly not surprising that, like anything else, fan bases age, people age. That shouldn't be surprising to anyone. I just wonder if, and I'd love to see kind of the sex breakdown as far as the shows specifically, because when you look at Demon Slayer not being number 1, that already kind of signals to me that chances are you're probably going to see a higher percentage of women watching anime, because I'm guessing Demon Slayer's audience isn't very largely female.
Probably not.
I'm guessing that's more of a male-dominated fandom. But then you look at Oshinoko, Shin-Chan's probably just all over the place.
It's probably very balanced.
I would imagine Apothecary Diaries probably pulls in a decent amount of females as well. So it would be really cool to kind of see how that broke down. But again, we don't have
the complete data.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's kind of interesting. Try to see if there's any more information in the article, but not really a whole lot. If we see any more breakdown on that, we'll definitely share it. But just, again, kind of fascinating. It is interesting to me. As you mentioned, obviously your fan base is aging, but what they're not doing is aging out of anime. I think, that's one of those things that I've saw some other articles here talking about, kind of these companies trying to fight that misconception that anime is for kids and that, it can't be for adults. And, it's proof that, you may not be watching the same shows you were watching when you were a teenager, but there really is something for everyone. Anime isn't one thing. It is really just a medium of shows that can fit into any category, whether you're young or old.
Yeah, and I've always been kind of curious as to how that is in Japan compared to here, because I feel like it's always been a struggle here as far as anytime there's a cartoon or animated series that is clearly designed for adults to watch. There's always that weird, like, well, anime or cartoons are for kids. What are you doing? We've seen it so many times over the years, whether it was The Simpsons originally, South Park, Family Guy. There's always that next show where it's like, why is a cartoon doing this? And I wonder how that's like in other places, especially like Japan.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, clearly those numbers show that it is much more balanced over there, which is probably a good sign for their anime industry when they really need some positive signs with a lot of other negative news. Let's get to our final story, and this is one we could spend a lot of time talking about. I don't think we're going to today, which is why I kind of saved it for last. Smackdown on Friday night. Everybody knew The Rock was going to show up. We talked about it on Friday. He did. It was a long, winding segment that I don't know how much sense it made in the moment. It was probably a 25-minute segment that could have been a 10-minute segment and probably would have done it a lot of good. But the gist of it is The Rock wants Cody to be his corporate champion. He wants to take him to heights he's never seen before, basically give him everything he's ever wanted. And Cody has to think about it and give him the answer at Elimination Chamber. Had the segment just been that, I think there would have been a lot less complaining about it. I think the only thing I will say about it is it was clearly popular. We'll see that when the ratings come out this week what it did on TV, but the YouTube video of the segment did over 1 million views already. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, which I think is kind of a trademark of anything The Rock's involved with right now, just because he has this freedom to do and say whatever he wants, which makes it kind of wind all over the place. But there are a lot of interesting kind of directions they can go with this out of the Elimination Chamber that could end up salvaging what was kind of an awkward start to this storyline.
Yeah, if they really just leaned into this idea that The Rock is just totally insane, I think this could work pretty well because his appearances have been so diverging in theme. But the problem with the segment with The Rock, and I say problem even though it's hugely popular,
right,
is that you can't just get The Rock to come out there and do the plot progression because he's The Rock. So he comes out, and at first it's like, hey, here's The Rock, one of the most popular wrestlers, if not the most popular of all time. So there's got to be that portion. There's got to be him playing to the crowd, where then he kind of shifts into heel Rock and he makes fun of the crowd. But through all that, that's really entertaining stuff. He after he announced WrestleMania in New Orleans, he then started singing When the Saints Go Marching In. And it's just that's the kind of stuff with The Rock you're always going to get. There's no escaping that. And I'm fine with that. But then ultimately, you're 15 minutes in, and now you have to do the actual storyline part of it. And
it's jarring.
Yeah, it really is, because it's just like, oh, he's not the funny guy anymore. Now he's like insane corporate, chairman or board member guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they could do a lot of cool things with this. I think we give Shawn Michaels like so much praise for basically just booking his career through NXT wrestlers. So we have to kind of look at this no differently with The Rock, where, The Rock was the corporate champion. So it only makes sense that he would now be on the other side of that, booking a storyline with a potential corporate champion. It's almost too easy to not pursue.
You could do Cody as the corporate champion. Wouldn't make a lot of sense from a storyline standpoint because he is the champ already. He doesn't need corporate's help to be the champ. You could have a desperate Punk or Cena take him up on that offer, win the Elimination Chamber, and be the corporate champion at WrestleMania. There's a lot of ways, like I said, that this could end up making sense. And, of course, he'll look back at it and be like, oh, you guys should have just waited it out. And again, I have no issue with the idea of the segment. It was just the way we got there is just – and, again – at the point where I would like The Rock just to come back and be babyface Rock and have fun and crap on heels and let people cheer him like we're supposed to get with Cena. Let's appreciate these guys. And I hate that we also then have to turn and do an angle on it too. And again, it's another last minute pivot potentially from whatever they're planning to do at WrestleMania, which has got to be a nightmare from a booking standpoint. Like, even though they kind of expected it this time.
Yeah.
So they had some contingency plans in place, but it could be interesting. It was just a weird way to start.
I think the timing's a little off. I think if you would have started this storyline with The Rock at the same time you had that promo between Cody and Punk, where Punk was kind of painting Cody out to be this like tired, like worn out champion that's just struggling to kind of hold on.
Yeah.
I think that would have worked out a lot better, because you could see potentially The Rock showing up being like, hey man, we'll keep you on top. We'll make sure you can maintain this. There's just strings attached on the other end of that. I think that would have aligned itself perfectly. you're going to have to go back and kind of like rethread that now.
And the problem with doing corporate punk is like you've made such a big deal out of this favor that Paul Heyman has. He owes him a favor. What could be bigger favor than The Rock just coming in and deciding you're the champion? And like, there's nothing Paul Heyman can promise that's going to be better than that. So it kind of makes that favor look pretty terrible by comparison. So
yeah.
And you know, maybe they totally pull Swerve and he puts Reigns in the match, and Reigns, you know, like he makes Reigns the evil guy again, and we just go down that road again. I don't know, but the whole thing was weird. It was just sitting through it was kind of tough. But again, it may end up being okay at the end. It did cost them some time on women's matches, which is something we criticized over on Friday that they don't need any help with. They already struggle to book their women, and it didn't get any better on Friday. So
at least it happened on SmackDown.
You only have 3 hours. If it had been on Raw, it would have been bad, and probably more profanity filled. Although he did drop an F-bomb in the ring, which did get muted on USA. But
yeah,
you know, that's just like I said. It's The Rock. He's going to do what he wants. It's just, and it'll probably end up being fine at the end. It was just a very, very strange way to start, but we kind of expected that. That's why we tuned in, I guess. So. Ready to get to the Empire Express?
Let's do it.
Let's wrap this thing up. I'll take the odds as always. GameStop has discontinued pre-orders for Pokemon trading card game products, and purchase limits will be set for select products going forward. Some Pokemon fans are not happy. What do you think about the new policy?
I think everywhere should have purchase limits on TCG products. I think scalpers are just way too big of a problem. I'm not a big fan of not doing pre-orders because I think for legit customers, you need to be able to ensure that they can get the product. Yeah, I think it's a start, and I think they need to get people in their stores. So that's I'm not surprised they're doing this. The TV anime version of Mobile Suit Gundam G-Quex will premiere on Japanese TV on April 8th. Are you excited for it?
Yeah, I am. I'm excited for us to go see the movie, which will be in theaters here in the U.S. Starting this Thursday night. We'll run in most cases for about a week, and curious to see where it's going to stream. Hopefully something that I have access to once the TV series starts. I'm just really interested because of the whole Ava Gundam tie-ins the original Universal Century. I don't know if it'll be good or not, but it's going to be interesting. Sales of the PlayStation 5 Pro have started to fall behind PlayStation 4 Pro's pace, according to one industry analyst. Does this news surprise you?
No, not at all, really. I think the farther we go, the more PC gaming is going to be on the rise, and I think as a result, it just becomes a little untenable for you to think you should have to spend $700 on a half step up in the console generation progress. I think PS5's been kind of struggling with really big titles as far as why should I have to upgrade to the PS5 Pro. So yeah, it's not too surprising to me. The survival game Longvinter has finally left Steam early access period after 3 years in development. It's been dubbed the Animal Crossing with guns by fans. Do you think this will be a big hit?
Probably. I mean, everybody loves Animal Crossing for some reason. It's not really something I've ever gotten into, but you add guns, and that should be the #1 game in America, I'm guessing. But, these Steam games they've proven that they've been able to create these games that are fun to play and fun to stream, and they aren't necessarily AAA titles. This sounds like it could be another one in that line, and I have a feeling we'll see it everywhere in a few months. Finally, the 4-piece Japanese pop rock band Ryoku Shoku Shikai announced on February 17th that their 8th single, Hananinate, Be a Flower, has surpassed a milestone of 200 million streams. It is comforting that good anime themes can still be made and be popular, right?
Yeah, you kind of lose sight of that when you have these kind of viral hits that, to me, aren't very good, but people tend to love them. But there's still plenty of really good music being made. I think even this season alone, you have shows like Blue Box, Sakamoto Days, and Solo Leveling, all with really strong openings. So good music isn't going anywhere yet.
Yeah, which is great to see, and that's a great song. Definitely check it out from the Apothecary Diaries. There is still a lot of really great music out there, and we'll probably get around to spotlighting some music again soon on the Nerdcast News Report, but that is going to wrap things up for today. We've got your week started with all the nerdy news you need to know on this Monday morning. We appreciate you joining us, whether you joined us live or on the VOD. Don't forget, we'll be back on Wednesday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, for the Wednesday midweek edition of the Nerdcast News Report. Don't forget to check out our podcast from last night, the Music Weekly. Big thanks to Stud, the band, for sharing our post, and we certainly appreciate any shares and listens on our VOD for that. Definitely check that out. Great music we had last night. We'll be back again for another Music Weekly next Sunday for the music of February the 14th. But that's going to wrap things up for today. Big thanks to everybody for joining us. Big thanks to Stove Leg Media. Big thanks to Mike as well. And big thanks to you, wherever you may be listening on this morning. That's going to wrap things up for the entire crew. I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.